Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. Nia. It may seem hard to believe, but there was once an ancient network of roads going all the way from the edges of the Mediterranean to the farthest reaches of Asia and Africa. Before the invention of cars, goods moved in caravans. Hundreds of merchants used the vast road network to bring exotic goods from places like India and China all the way to the Roman Empire. Some of the most valuable goods transported were silk, which is how the trade network earned its name, the Silk Road. One of these ancient roads led directly to the far-flung city of Nia. It was an impressive center for commerce in an isolated oasis way out in the Taklamakan Desert. Even these days, with airplanes and cars, it's not an easy place to get to. The city of Nia dates back to at least 206 BC, prospered until around 23 AD, and then gradually started to be covered by the shifting sands of the desert. Judging on what archaeologists have found in the destroyed city, its residents left in a hurry. When scholars began investigating in recent years, they found evidence that dogs were left tied up in front of people's houses. Something happened in the remote oasis town that caused its residents to abandon their meals, leave their pets, and flee into the desert. Scientists have never been able to understand what caused the sudden desertion. 2,000 years ago, the city was abandoned in a matter of minutes, then lost until rediscovered by Sir Mark Arlstein in 1901. Number 9. Firozco and the Turquoise Mountain. The Ghurid Empire was one of the most powerful groups of people to rule over the lands of Persia, and yet despite their prestige, not very many people have heard of them. They ruled a massive part of the mountains and plains in northern Afghanistan and all the way through northern India. They were only around for about 200 years, but they still made an impact. Between the 10th century and their dramatic end in 1215, they were the mountain overlords of Ghor. They also built one of the greatest cities Afghanistan has ever seen, Firozco. It's no exaggeration. Scholars really have referred to Firozco as one of the greatest cities ever constructed. Its name translates from Persian to mean turquoise mountain. As far as the ancient historical records show, it was a vast summer capital where people flocked to in the hot months to participate in celebration and trade. The city was incredibly wealthy. It was ripe with architectural splendors, and yet nobody has ever seen them before. The city of Firozco is lost. Location unknown. We know it was somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. Researchers just don't know exactly where it is. The whole city was destroyed by Genghis Khan's son, Tolui, in 1223. The empire had poured a large amount of their resources into the creation of the city, only to have it torn down and lost forever. Number 8. Usaklihoyuk. The Hittites were the dominant civilization in ancient Anatolia around 1700 BC. They were spread across the northern Levant all the way into Upper Mesopotamia, thriving and surviving up until around 1190 BC. When the empire collapsed, they split into small factions and tribes, but they never made a grand comeback. What we know about the Hittite people comes largely from ancient cuneiform texts written in the Akkadian language. Many of these texts include diplomatic correspondence between the Hittites in Anatolia and their counterparts in Assyria, Babylonia, and Egypt. In one of these texts is described a mythical city called Zibalanda. The tablet describes it as a cult center of religious activity, with worshippers primarily revering the storm god Ziblantil. The city was supposedly a place of great celebration, holding annual festivals and mysterious rituals. However, nobody has ever found it. At least nobody knew they had found it until just recently. Archaeologists working with the University of Pisa were excavating the site of Usaklihoyuk when they realized they were combing through the ruins of a lost city. The site of Usaklihoyuk is an ancient mound, a vague pile of dirt with secrets hidden underneath. Researchers always knew the mound was important, but it was only now that they found the remains of structures buried underground. They uncovered a temple, a fortress, and other artifacts that point to the location once being a city. Professor D'Agostino says it could be the city of Zibalanda, the cult center of the Hittite storm god. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Mr. Unlucky and Ed's Cover PH for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Number 7. Harappa. In the province of Punjab in Pakistan lies the ancient village of Harappa, directly next to the modern town of the same name. But the ancient part of this city is truly old and represents some of the greatest achievements of the Indus Valley civilization. The city was discovered in 1826 by James Lewis, a deserter from the British Army. After he ditched the army, he became an explorer and went searching for evidence of lost civilizations. When he came upon the remnants of Harappa, he believed they were from the age of Alexander, 1,300 years earlier. Over the next few years, the city was gradually picked apart by locals working on a new railroad who wanted cheap supplies. It was easier for them to disassemble the stone blocks of the ancient buildings than carve new ones. It wouldn't be until even later that archaeologists realized the site was much older than the days of Alexander the Great. The city of Harappa likely began 6,000 years ago or more. Harappa was one of the gateway towns leading to the interior of the Indus Valley civilization. It had massive defensive walls, the people here were skilled artisans, and they had all the same districts you would expect to find in an ancient city. There were residential districts, open markets, industrial zones, and large public spaces. They used mud for mortar, built their houses out of burnt bricks, and survived thanks to the fresh water supply of the nearby river. It was only when the river dried up that Harappa started to die. Number 6. The Sinja Valley. In the Sinja Valley of Nepal, archaeologists with Cambridge University revealed the remains of a lost ancient settlement. They uncovered crumbling palaces, shattered temples, and even a network of underground pipes used to bring water straight into people's homes. Old monoliths were found here, built from huge stone columns, just like Stonehenge. It wasn't long before researchers realized they were dealing with a megalithic city, which was likely the capital of the mysterious Khasa Kingdom. The Khasa Kingdom of Nepal has a lot of parallels to the Ghurid Empire of Afghanistan. Both kingdoms only ruled for about 200 years, and both their mighty capitals were lost. The major difference is that the Khasa Kingdom came into power right around the time the Ghurid Empire was defeated by the Mongols in the early 1200s. The Khasa were an interesting group of people whose origins may have been ancient. Inscriptions from some of the earliest Indian texts, like the Mahabharata, mention the Khasa tribes. These were an ancient people who lived in the passes of Tibet, the valleys of Nepal, and the mountains of India. Nobody knows how old they are, or if they were the descendants of the Indus Valley people. Whatever the case may be, the Khasa became a kingdom to be reckoned with in the 11th century and took over the Sinja Valley. But by 1413 AD, they had not expanded enough. The last king perished and the kingdom disintegrated, and their capital in the Sinja Valley was lost. Number 5. The lost site of the Maya. Geologists working in northern Guatemala have just discovered more lost cities than they know what to do with. They used lasers beamed out of airplanes to create an incredibly detailed map of the Guatemalan jungle. The lasers revealed over 650 square miles of abandoned settlements and cities once occupied by the Maya civilization. This was once a bustling hub of activity, with people traveling along interconnected highways by foot and through canals using narrow boats. There are over 1,000 settlements lost to the jungle here, most of them nothing more than a few crumbling stone buildings. And yet there were also pyramids, temple complexes, and huge reservoirs used for water storage. One of the authors of the study, Carlos Morales Aguilar, says the lasers showed evidence for the first time in history of an integrated Maya society. What this means is that they didn't just find a single lost city, but rather they uncovered a connected civilization. It was like uncovering an entire province, with small settlements connected to larger towns, all leading to industrial cities and religious centers. To put things simply, the lasers revealed the entire lost landscape of the Maya region in the northern Guatemalan jungle. But just what exactly were the Maya doing here? Scientists say the Maya settled in the region because it was a kind of Goldilocks zone for development. It had enough high land to build settlements, with enough marshy lowlands for agriculture. There's also a large source of limestone in the area to help build their pyramids and homes. Number 4. The Atlantis of Egypt. Egypt has its very own sunken city, and it can be found underneath the waters off the coast of Alexandria. Heraklion, Egypt's own Atlantis, is currently one of the most marvelous underwater archaeological discoveries ever made. It was an ancient trading port built on a pair of islands in the Nile Delta. It had its own harbors, canals, temples, and great houses linked by bridges and pontoons. Picture Venice in Italy with its narrow canals navigated by ferries, only in ancient Egypt. Heraklion likely got its start in the 12th century BC, over 800 years before the city of Alexandria was founded. For decades, archaeologists weren't even fully convinced the city existed. They had read inscriptions of it, seen the name of the city mentioned in ancient texts, but never imagined it was really waiting off the coast to be discovered. In 1933, a Royal Air Force commander flew over the bay and saw the ruins of something in the water. But it wouldn't be until 1999 that famous French archaeologist Frank Gaudio's team dove into the depths and began uncovering history. They excavated statues of gods, the faces of kings and queens, broken temples, and so much more. We now know Heraklion sank because the soil it was built on liquefied. At the end of the 2nd century BC, the whole city started to drift into the sea until it was submerged under 30 feet of water. Number 3. The Lost City of the Lulubi. A team of French archaeologists recently discovered an ancient lost city near the Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan. Scientists are saying the city once stood as a strategic gateway into the first great empire of Mesopotamia. That would be the Akkadian Empire, which rose to prominence 5,000 years ago. The city was likely the capital of the Lulubi, described in ancient Mesopotamian scripture as mountain barbarians. They were not technically part of Akkad, but a separate group controlling the mountains near Baghdad. To reach Akkad from the north, the only way was to move through the territory of the Lulubi. They had their own king, King Anubanini, who ruled around 2300 BC. They were literate in both Akkadian and Sumerian writing. They supported a large population using extensive agricultural systems, and they had the same technology as the rest of the people in Mesopotamia. But of course, they were overshadowed by the Akkadians to the south. What a lot of people don't realize is that Mesopotamia was not a single civilization, but rather a region. Mesopotamia was home to a lot of different people. The Lulubi, the Awan, the Kimash, the Shimashki, the Sherihun, etc. Most of these people have been erased from history, their cities destroyed, and their cultures lost. Just discovering the 4,000-year-old Lulubi city is nothing short of a miracle, though even still we know very little about them. Number 2. Cuentovic. Cuentovic was a Frankish trading town in the early Middle Ages near the English Channel. It was founded in the early 6th century by an unknown king of Neustria, one of the western kingdoms of the Franks. It was here where Anglo-Saxon monks arrived from England to begin their long pilgrimages to Rome. But to be entirely honest, the history of the town is a little hard to understand since it no longer exists. The only historical evidence of Cuentovic comes in the form of coins and taxation records. Most historians agree the town was established as a way to increase long-distance trade. It was also wise to have a town directly on the English Channel to help defend the borders of the kingdom. In the 1980s, archaeologist David Hill uncovered the physical location of Cuentovic, but much to the disappointment of the experts, nothing remained. We know where the city was, but there isn't a single piece of it left. The town was raided by Vikings in 842, only surviving because they paid a massive tribute to their attackers. But then, in the 10th century, merchants started to leave as bigger and better ports were being built in England. Eventually, the whole city just kind of evaporated. Archaeologists are still a little baffled as to how the entire town just one day ceased to exist. Number 1. Niani. The small village of Niani can be found in Guinea, many miles inland from the Atlantic Ocean in West Africa. The town is currently still occupied, sitting right at the edge of the forest in a region once rich with gold, palm oil, and ivory. But the true history of Niani is largely lost. Many scholars believe it was once the capital of the powerful Mali Empire. This was a kingdom that ruled a large chunk of West Africa from between 1226 to 1670. It was one of the most prosperous African kingdoms of the Middle Ages, and at its peak, the largest in West Africa. However, we don't have as many records of African history as we do of European history during that time, so there is little reliable information on the once proud cities of the Mali Empire. Niani is mentioned briefly in the writings of a 16th century traveler named Leo Africanus, and also by the 14th century historian Shihab al-Umari, who said Niani was the capital of the entire empire. It was a main hub for trade, bustling with over 100,000 inhabitants, and lorded over by powerful emperors. Niani likely controlled all trade routes going north and south, and was the garrison of the imperial army. In the 1600s, the African empire began to decline, and Niani lost its importance. It shrank, people left, and it went from a shining city to a poor village. Archaeologists first found evidence of an ancient city in the 1920s, but almost nothing was left. These days, there's barely even a single stone house to prove a mighty capital once stood here. Thanks for watching! If you could find just one undiscovered lost city, which one would you choose? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!